I didn't even want to open the app. I didn't want to look at it. I was just pissed, like so pissed.
All right, J Rich, how are you? Talk to me. You look beautiful in that Newcastle shirt.
Thank you, Tom. I'm in shambles. But how are you, my friend? How are you doing? You are in a new country. You have flown away from Canada. You are officially back to being across the pond. And so this pod will hopefully find its balance after an absolutely disgusting game week 4. Actually, Tom, I can blame you for that. If we're talking about the balance of FPL, me being on one side of the pond, you being on the other, everything's been good. Then you come to my side of the pond, and what happens? Everything goes to shit. Please, my friend, help me, because you said it was going to be tough. You said it was going to be hard. I did not imagine what was at my doorsteps when I was walking into game week 4. But how are you, my friend?
You're trying to say I've disrupted the yin and yang. Yeah, things are good. So. I'm in Turkey, so I think I'm across many ponds now. So this is across the many pods episode. A lot to unpack this week, like you say. The game week 4, I was looking before at the Thesaurus for disaster. It came up with calamity, catastrophe, collapse, debacle, defeat. I was like, all of this is great. These are all great words. And like you say, like I think the less we talk about game week 4 and just look forwards, the better. I'm really glad that I've got you onto FPL, so I've got someone else that I can share the despair with. It's quite nice. It's quite therapeutic. Hopefully everyone watching can have a laugh about it rather than getting too upset about it. But the only other thing to mention before I pass back to you is we hit 100 subs. So thank you to FPL Focal for shouting us out on the deadline stream.
Sir.
I don't know if is it thank you? I don't know. I've got to go find a dodgy tattoo.
I was going to say, you need to do a bit more than just a thank you. You need to get that tattooed.
Yeah, so I've got to go find a dodgy place in Turkey to go get it done. I'm not sure where to get it yet. Somewhere very hidden and hopefully the cheapest place I can find.
I mean, it'll probably be cheaper than in London.
Yeah,
right?
that will definitely come. Yeah, but it'll probably come with a range of diseases or other. So we'll see. But yeah, hopefully, I think for a lot of the new subs, hopefully you guys find some insight in amongst all this waffle. But yeah, I think the main headline for me this week was, and probably last thing before I pass back to you, Joe Rich, is just advise against a reactive wildcard this week. I know there's basically no fixture swings this week. If you still got Liverpool assets, you want to keep them. Be patient with your players. The ones that you picked will likely do well this week again, and probably look to wildcard any fires out from game week 6 onwards. So yeah, J Rich, what are your thoughts on this week? What do you want to talk about?
I mean, I talk about everything. Liverpool absolutely screwed it. It was really bad. Like I was so tilted, Tom, because I don't know if you're watching that game. They subbed off Diaz, they subbed off Jota, and they subbed off one other player. I think it was McAllister, someone in the midfield. And Jota went off at the 59th minute. So he didn't get the extra points, but Diaz did. And I got them both on my team, and I was just fuming because my team was already struggling. Salah was shit, and it was just like, what is going on? Everything is going wrong. And then, of course, you get the Isak injury, and we can talk about that because he is being transferred out like crazy, and there's a report that he suffered a foot injury. I don't know if it's real. You told me there's a lot of fake news on FPL Twitter, so I'm very nervous about Isak. But to be fair, I was already looking potentially at going from Isak to Watkins this week just to kind of mitigate any risk. We do have a little bit of extra funds there. And I did want to mention to you as well, because we're here, De Bruyne. He got hurt. We don't know the status of him for this week, but he did get hurt in the Champions League game yesterday. And then talking about Luis Diaz, who is the second most transferred in player, I believe now he is listed at 7.8 mil, Tom. He did not start yesterday. He was on the bench, and they started Gakpo on left wing instead. So I am full-blown tilt right now because I got both Diaz and Isak in my personal team, and I don't know what to do. I'll probably keep Diaz and move Isak. But where do you want to start? Because Pedro still dealing with the injury. Gavardio transferred out because he is flipping time with Rico Lewis, which also was not good for us this week. Lots of things to unpack from the previous week. But what do you want to talk about in terms of either fixtures or transfers from this week that we've seen so far?
Wow, a lot of fires.
A lot of fires.
I think the main thing that one of the discussion points I'm seeing on FPL Twitter this week is what is the best third or second, depending on what formation, slot for striker? Who is the best 6 million forward? With João Pedro having a knock, which no one saw coming for after the international break, as well as several other injuries. Wissa got injured, which was obviously a shame for people who had just brought him in. Obviously got a goal against Man City, which was quite a nice, little gift before he went. But he's out for a couple of months, so I think the main ones people are talking about at that 6 million point is Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Vardy, both of which I just don't think are great options. Calvert-Lewin, obviously ill as well, but like his fixture run is really, really good. And he has been scoring. He's been quite consistent. I think he scored 3 already this season. So in that fixture run, you can see him getting quite a lot of goals throughout that. His minutes are getting a little bit better as well. I think Dyche is starting to trust him as just the striker slot fully. But I just don't see Everton really clicking enough to warrant. I think he's like a good option. I just don't think he's going to be completely prolific in the answer to all your problems. The other ones, Vardy, the reason I don't like Vardy is because I think he only played half the games last season for them in the Championship. And he's only had, I don't know if I got this right, but I think he's taken 4 shots this season across those 4 games, and he's scored 2 of them, or 3. Is how many goals
very few chances for him so far. But still, I don't think they have the shots.
4 shots across 4 games and 1 goal and 2 goals. So I just don't know if that return is going to be, is that consistent? Is he going to be able to continue to do that, especially with some I just don't think Leicester look great either. I'm trying to avoid the newly promoted sides as much as I can. Having said that, the one player that I was quite excited by, and I'm not sure if that excitement's died down, having a think about, was Duran for Aston Villa. Watkins obviously played in the Champions League 60 minutes, then came off. He had ice on his foot or ankle or Achilles, I think it was. So obviously, a lot of people are saying, "Oh, this is just typical after an impact injury. They'll just keep icing it after the thing." But again, it's just another spanner in the works. As a Watkins zone, you've got Duran breathing down his neck, and at the same time, he's potentially being iced and his minutes being reduced here and there. So either I could see Duran starting against Wolves and Watkins coming on for the last 30, or vice versa. So I think Duran is not a bad option because he just always scores when he comes on. He looks really great as well, passes the eye test. So it's just another one for me to consider. I don't know what your thoughts are on those 3. Is there anyone else that I've missed?
I mean, you look at Duran right here, goals in 3 of 4 games, playing less than 30 minutes in each of them, especially when you talk about Vardy's the one that, I would consider him, but to your point, he just makes the most of his chances. He's a great goal scorer, but the chances for them are just so few and far between. They're all on the counter. It's not going to be consistent. How do you feel about Welbeck potentially with Pedro being hurt? You do have a poor fixture run, which is the reason why he's not being transferred in too much. But if he's going to be the only guy there for Brighton, he's probably going to get a majority of the opportunities. Mitoma, once again, man, just... What is he doing? Let us down. We were all over Mitoma. He didn't do anything. But Duran, I think, is the one that intrigues me the most. But my question to you is, is there a chance that he would ever start next to Watkins? Because Rodgers has been the main guy there. Everyone talks about Rodgers, wants him to be a thing, especially because he's so cheap. He plays in the midfield, so he scores more points when he gets goals. He's always attacking. But is there a chance that he could kind of take over that spot next to Watkins or play alongside Watkins instead of Rodgers?
Yeah, I was seeing a few Villa fans just praising Duran so much to be how can they keep him out the side? And it's a question of whether Emery thinks it's healthy for the 2 strikers to be competing for one spot, so keeping each other, hungry, one scoring, one gets subbed on. He wants to score and prove himself, and he's splitting the minutes well across the Champions League and Premier League. So that's one option. The other option is he switches the system up and he goes with 2 up top, and instead of maybe Rodgers switches to the wing or Rodgers just completely gets subbed and he brings in Duran and Watkins. I'm not sure. I don't think Duran and Watkins have started a game together. So I think that's probably more unlikely, but it is something that I've seen Villa fans on Twitter saying, why have we got these 2 world-class strikers? Why not just play them together kind of thing? I think if Watkins was fully fit, that would be more in question. But at the minute, Duran's the perfect option to manage his minutes around the 60-minute mark every week. So I think Watkins will continue to get the nod. And at 60 kind of minutes, Duran will come on at that point. I think until Watkins blanks and Duran comes on and scores and then he starts the next game, it's kind of like this head-to-head battle that they seem like they've got going on at Villa.
Yeah, I was looking at Chris Wood too because he's another one that the fixture run does look pretty good. You have the one Chelsea game, which isn't great, but outside of that, he's been okay. He's got 2 goals this season. Chances have been there pretty much every single game. Even against Liverpool, he had a couple chances. He's not my favorite player in the Prem, but again, at the price point, it's not too bad either at 6.1. So he was a player that I have been looking at a little bit.
I think more of a Forest is an interesting one because they're unbeaten this season. They're actually playing quite well. And the benefit of Chris Wood is because they don't score many. If you look at his points where they've scored one, it's been 9 points. So he's got 3 bonus points both times he scored. So like if he scores, you're guaranteed. If he just like one header in some 20th minute and nothing much else happens, he's guaranteed 9 points, which is pretty fantastic. With a good fixture run, I don't hate it for Chris Wood. He's probably the one. I mean, now that you mention it, that I would probably look to bring in over a Vardy or a DCL. And with Duran's reduced minutes, maybe that's more of like a risky play. Wood just seems like your standard, get him in, plays 90 minutes, might score a goal. Not explosive, but like will, get you good points if he does. So I think that's a really good shout as well.
Yeah, so the reason why I wanted to bring this up was only because I was looking at whether he's more of a differential play, but when you look actually at who's available, Duran is actually less selected right now than Wood is. But I don't hate it, right? Because again, it's the issue for me, and we already talked about off the top of maybe bringing in Watkins for this week, is that I just want a guy who's probably going to play 75, 80, maybe even the full 90. Like if Watkins is only playing 60, we've kind of seen this happen with Watkins throughout the year. If it wasn't for this week, he really wasn't doing very well for people's teams. If you had him in the team, he wasn't doing well. And so you have Duran, who's playing great, scoring almost every single game. It's like, why wouldn't we want him in our team? Well, if he's only playing 30 minutes, that's where it becomes so much more difficult because we're only getting the 1 point if he doesn't do anything. He's still scoring a lot, but you can't expect him to do this every single week. The problem is the fixture run, which is obviously phenomenal. But I do like Woods as well. So I think that Wood is definitely an option. He is a player who I've been watching more intently because I know he's going to play minutes. I know he's going to create chances. And as you mentioned here, it's a great other shout out. He's getting the bonus points almost every single time. As you mentioned, 3 bonus points in both games that he scored. Forrest has only scored 1 goal in each of the games they've played so far, and it's been his. So shout out to him for that. And I think he could be an option. But I do have a bit of an Isak problem, and I'm wearing the jersey right now, and I need you to talk me off this cliff with Isak because I am so ready to get rid of him, Tom. Like I am ready to say, you know what, Isak, I love you, man, but it's just more trouble than it's worth right now. Would you suggest making the switch from Isak to Watkins if you could? Because for us on this team, we got 1.2 left. We could do that. Or how do you feel about the rest of the squad right now as it stands?
Yeah, I think the squad's in a pretty good, position given that people on Game Week 6 wildcard will want Saka and Mbeumo, Haaland. Well, maybe it's not in a good position. Maybe looking at this, maybe it's not in that good of a position. But I think we do have a few of the players that people want to bring in. I think from Game Week 6, people are looking at either City assets, although Pep rotation is a bit of a disaster, and Brentford and Liverpool. So I think those are the ones that people want to load up on. For Brentford, I think people are looking at Flecken and Collins in the defence. Van den Berg is a 4.0 option for Brentford, who played this week. So I think he might be, if he continues to play at 4.0 on a wild card, absolutely fantastic pick, Van den Berg there. It's just whether he continues to play a full 90 from now to be seen, and whether you just want to not take the risk and go with the Pinnacle Collins. But I like Flecken in goal from that point onwards. I think Mbeumo will be the main man in midfield. Obviously playing striker for Brentford, but he'll be on penalties. And with Wissa out, I think more things will come through him or be reliant on him. And he's definitely on penalties, so that's good. The one player which I really like from Brentford in the midfield is Shade. He hasn't played much, but with 2 of their strikers out, I know now that I think Shade will potentially play striker with Mbeumo. Just the way he plays is kind of in behind. It's similar to how Brentford wants to play. If we have a look at him, I don't think he's kind of come on and played a little
Sporadically,
bit
it
throughout.
seems.
He's done, yes, but I think now is kind of like the point for him at 5.4 million. Not a bad option with the fixture run that Brentford have.
No, I like that. That's a good call out, because if you could have both of them in the team, everyone, like I mentioned, everyone always wants to have Rodgers because of the price, but if you can get a little differential with a player like Shade if he's going to play. The funny thing about it is you look at his games, and whenever he plays a lot, they win. So why isn't he playing more? And again, that's against Palace and Southampton versus City and Liverpool. But if he's going to play and they're going to win, might as well keep playing him. I don't hate this shout out at all. I think it's a good spot. He's a guy that's definitely very affordable. You can get in the club pretty easily. How do you feel about Eze, though? We were kind of thrown for a loop with Eze because he didn't take the pen in the game. And that was extremely frustrating for people who have Eze. Still 25% selected by a lot of people. And 6.9 mil. I still love him a lot. And I believe he scored in the cup game this week. But how do you feel about Eze?
I'm seeing a lot of people ship him out. And I think it would be a completely different story if the free kick, which was disallowed, went in and he took the penalty this week. He'd be looking at 3 double-digit hauls out of 4 games. I just don't think with so many other fires to put out in our team or in many other teams, I get people are getting frustrated with him and he's already dropped in price, probably will drop again. I just think we picked him for a reason at the start. There's no point if we have, maybe on wildcard, I'd consider taking him out. I don't think Palace look that great. And if Mateta's going to rotate penalties with him, etc., maybe it's one to go out. But I still think there's a lot of value for him. And a lot of models still predict him as being one of the highest scoring midfielders in the game. So I just think it's too early to jump off Eze. I'm quite happy keeping him in there. I think there's so many other fires across the board. And not necessarily fires, but I don't think you necessarily need to make a transfer if you have a free transfer for the sake of it. Rolling a transfer this year is so vital. And going into game week 6, it might just be the edge between, okay, maybe I can just get 2 Arsenal or Brentford in, and then I don't need to wildcard, save your wildcard for further down the line. I think that's a much better option than just moving Eze to another 7 million defender when Eze will probably do pretty well against United, let's be honest. So that's kind of where my head's at with the team, I think. The only question that I'll throw back to you is this, and you mentioned it, you've obviously got the shirt of Isak on. Is this the week given the eye injury, given the toe injury, given Newcastle aren't playing that well, is it worth us pivoting Isak to, like you said, Watkins earlier? I think he has a good run of fixtures. I think he'll probably score against Wolves. Or do we pivot to even Havertz and get ahead of the curve with their game week 6 onwards? Lovely fixtures. Obviously, he's got to play City this week, so bringing in someone who will likely blank this week doesn't necessarily make sense. But is it more of a longer term play that if we don't think Isak is going to play, maybe if we get that confirmation, that's when we do the pivot. But let's see where your head's at.
Yeah, so one, you've already scared me a bit off of Watkins, and that is a little bit concerning because I wanted to put him in my team, and I wanted to put him in this team because of the fixtures. You see them, Wolves, Ipswich, United's fine, Fulham's fine, Bournemouth's fine, and then you guys a couple ones that are tougher after that. But when you talk about Havertz, one of the reasons why I really like potentially taking him instead of Watkins is because while they do have City, which is going to be tough, he may not score in that game. If for some reason Saka delivers a ball of dreams to Havertz and it lands on his head and it goes in the back of the net, we're laughing because we already have him in the team. He's going to go up in price. Leicester, Southampton, Bournemouth, they're going to destroy all 3 of those teams after that. We talked about maybe going from Trent to Gabriel, either on wildcard or potentially even heading into next week. The question for me, Tom, is would you consider making no moves? Because where it stands right now, recording this pod on Thursday, I want to leave Isak in the team until the last minute. If it's, there's a report that he's doubtful to play this weekend because of this toe injury, he has the eye injury, we'll see. But I'm not going to make the move right now because for my money, I want to keep him in the team for at least this week. That way we could have 2 transfers heading into next week. But if for some reason we find out early he's not going to play, he's not going to be active, I think I am leaning on Havertz and just saying, you know what? I got a small edge in price because I'm going to be saving money. I also get a little bit of edge in terms of the ownership across the board. So I think my personal pivot would be Havertz, get ahead of it because he's going to be transferred in after this week and we could see a price rise, at which point we'd be making a little bit of money as well, already having him in the team. It worked out really well and I have to give you a lot of credit. You said, you know what, let's roll with Saka. Let's see what happens in that first game against Tottenham. He got an assist and we're laughing. And I think you could see the same thing happen against City. You know, City, honestly, they haven't played very good. De Bruyne is hurt, which I don't think will hurt them that much because Foden is back and he looked decent in his first game back. But you look every game they're conceding. I don't think they have a single clean sheet this season, right? We wanted to bring in Rico Lewis because of the clean sheets. Outside of that first week, that's it.
Yeah.
No clean sheets. So if they're going to concede every game, having Saka, having Havertz, that's more than fine. It is away. It's going to be a tough game, but I think that would be my personal pivot. You do get a bit of an edge in terms of the ownership, and he's a cheaper price. So I think you've convinced me. If I was making a pivot off of Isak for this week, which a lot of people have already made, and they've already kind of made the decision, hopefully they made the right one, I think Havertz would be my pick.
Yeah, I mean, I'm feeling pretty proud of how coherent our discussions are kind of going. We're not arguing that much, which is pretty good. I think my only fear with bringing in Havertz is just the way that City and Arsenal games have gone in the past. I can just see it being a nil-nil. Yeah. And the only other thing about Havertz is, does he block you from having double Arsenal defense for the next 3? I know a lot of people are going to be with Raya and Gabriel, or Gabriel and Saliba with Saka. I think Saka is just the player that Saka and Gabriel are probably the two that, he's going to be nailed. And I think it's a good point that you mentioned is we decided not to sell Saka this week, despite everyone else kind of jumping off him, is we probably got 6 more points than whoever we would have brought in. And we've got a free transfer that we don't now need to transfer Saka back in. So I feel like we're in a pretty strong position from that point of view. I think the longer we can leave it with Isak up until we either get an update that he will start, or we know that he just definitely won't play.
Yeah.
The only issue with that is Eddie Howe is obviously he's not very clear in his press conference. He doesn't like to give much away. So he'll kind of be like, oh, Isak hasn't trained at all. He might play. And then he's like, he has actually trained and he's fit and he's starting for the 90. I think our best option would be if we have a good feeling that Isak is going to play, is just to keep Isak. And maybe someone else comes in. I don't hate playing Harwood Bellis with Ipswich at home for Southampton, because I do think Southampton will finally pull their finger out and get a good result, and I can see them keeping a clean sheet at home. Harwood Bellis also scored in the Carabao Cup, I think, for Southampton. So, I mean, it's obviously not not that much good of an insight, but if it's not the end of the world, if we think Isak's going to play and then he doesn't, at least we've got someone playing that will come in. At the same time, I do like a pivot. If we just think Isak's not going to play, Newcastle aren't playing well, he's going to be out for a couple of weeks, let's just get ahead of the curve and go pivot to Havertz, because chances are Havertz is going to outscore anyone else that we bring in. And we've got it, even if he doesn't, we're then set for game week 6 onwards with Saka and Havertz together. So I think that's a pretty reasonable plan. The rest of the players, like this week, if you look at it on paper, Flecken against Tottenham I don't hate. Lewis is one which I'm struggling with in my own team as to whether I start him this week or not, because I think we're going to have to wait for some leaks and see what's happening with them. Like, he's kind of a frustrating player, but I can see him starting. He started in the Champions League again.
Yep.
And I can see Arsenal, Man City being a 0-0. So I don't think I'm going to captain Haaland this week either. Trent, I really like against Bournemouth. He got an assist last night or the night before. I think it'll be hard to get a clean sheet against Bournemouth. They tend to do pretty well away from home. But it's not one, I'm not too far off thinking about captaining Trent in my own team. I just think he's due a haul. If I'm going to jump off him from game week 6, do I just roll the dice for one last week, one last little roller coaster with TAA? I don't know. But that's kind of what I'm thinking for Trent. Robinson, not a bad fixture if Isak's out. I do think both teams will concede though. And if he's got attacking return potential, I think he's good. And Burma against Tottenham's high line, I think, is really good. Mitoma's got a good fixture this week. Jota, I think, will start again against Bournemouth, so I'm happy with that. Saka, obviously, is kind of like, let's see, it's a bonus if they get anything against City. If I think he's been involved in every single goal for Arsenal this year. He's assisted every goal they've had, and only one that he didn't assist, he scored. So
yeah, one goal he hasn't assisted on. That's it. The second goal against Villa, one of the two.
And it was his goal. Oh, okay, yeah. Well, there you go. So there's only one goal he's not been involved with. That's crazy. So I think if anything does come against City, it will be through Saka. So I'm happy to own him. Eze, again, like I said, I think he'll do well against United. There may or may not be returns, but I think there's other areas we want to focus on. So just to quickly check our bench, I think our first sub should be Harvard Bellis. Okay, yeah, I mean, the other
Yeah.
two aren't going to play anyway. That's
Yeah.
fine.
What
Question
bench?
for you, Captain's armband, where do you want it this week?
That was the question, right? Because the popular pick obviously is Salah. Everyone who has Salah, they're going to be captaining him this week against Bournemouth, but we don't have Salah, so that's the biggest question: is do we go Saka or do we stick with Haaland, hope he scores, which is going to be so tough, or do we go another direction like Mitoma? Oh man, he didn't play good enough. I feel like we should stick to a Liverpool asset. The question is, do we go to Trent? I feel like if we don't have Salah, we could go Jota, but I feel like Trent is the highest upside asset that we own who has a good fixture, right? Like I think if we were to pick a player to be the captain of the team who isn't Haaland, who isn't Saka, it would probably have to be Trent. And we pray he gets a goal or assist and the clean sheet, at which point he's probably going to outscore a Salah unless Salah gets like 2 goals and an assist or something crazy like that. But if they get the clean sheet, which they've done most games this season outside of the last one, I think that would be our best pivot. Do you have any other arguments? Like, would you go with Jota praying he scores like 2 goals? And Buemo, I think the matchup is a little bit tougher than I'm hoping for, but I don't mind if you want to captain him. It's pretty bold, but I mean, we need to be bold after last week, but I think the Trent is where I would land right now.
The 3 for me looking at that I would be happy captaining as more of like a risky play, but outside of Haaland is Mitoma, Eze and Trent. I think Mitoma is rested. He obviously came back from international break, played, but didn't play particularly well, should have scored. I think against Forest, Brighton are going to come back and score at least 3 goals. I think Mitoma will be either get an assist or a goal. So that's kind of the reason why I like Mitoma. The reason I was also thinking Eze is I think he will do well against United. He likes to perform against the big teams. He's kind of fixture proof. I think his 1 goal came against Chelsea away from home. So I think Man United at home will be a pretty good option for him. And it's also a time when people are jumping off him. It might be nice to capitalize on some of that. The other one, which obviously I mentioned, which I love, I've also loved captaining Trent over the years. And I think he, more often than not, with the balance of being able to create, score, and a potential clean sheet at home for Anfield against Bournemouth, I like the Trent captain as well, I'll be honest. So that's kind of where my head's at. If you're also feeling Trent is the best option, then I think we just go with Trent.
Yeah, I mean, this team should be hungry. Like, losing to Forest at home is not what you want to see from a club of their caliber. And to have to play Bournemouth now, like, you just feel like they're ready to really put 4, 5, 6, like, to prove once again to all the people who've been talking shit about them all week that they're still a top club. They're still deserving of being, in that top 2 conversation, that they're not falling behind Arsenal, which I'm sure there was a lot of discussion about this week. I do think that's, the mantra and the reason why you captain Salah and that narrative is absolutely going to play out. But I still think for us and this team, I think that Trent at captain makes the most sense. I think it's the highest upside. I think especially for him, like, he hasn't made enough of an impact in the Prem, but it's like it's coming because he's had so many chances to get assists. He had a couple where he almost scored goals, and even the time where Salah screwed him over because he was offside on that one play and Trent would have had the goal there. Like, we know it's coming, and I think this could be the game where he finally gets involved and has a really big week.
Yeah, no, I really like it. I guess the only final thought in my head that may put us off, and we can maybe change it towards the end of the week back towards Haaland if we're too scared, is if Trent is, obviously he started against Milan, he got an assist, he did really well. Is Slot going to rotate the squad and play Conor Bradley at home against Bournemouth and just give him a bit of a rest? I personally can't see it. I think what will happen is he'll start Trent and bring him off around the 70-minute mark to manage his minutes, which I think is even a better reason to have Trent in there because it will lock in his clean sheet if he comes off early and Liverpool concede late. So I think it's one to monitor. Maybe we can have a think about it, but I do quite like Trent as a captain. I think for us it's either Trent or Haaland, and just assume Haaland will bulldoze the. I think the one reason why I'm not scared to go away from Haaland this week is because we don't own any Arsenal defenders. So if he does score, it's kind of doing us a favour and wiping everyone else's team's clean sheet. So I sometimes do play like that and just think, well, like, when else are we going to have the opportunity to not captain a Haaland, a Saka, or a Salah, it's not really going to come around too often. So I quite like the bold play this week.
Yeah, and I think even to your point with Haaland, like the other side of that is a lot of people who have him and Salah on their team are going to captain Salah instead because he's got the better fixture. And so he may be not a massive differential pick, but he could be a slight differential pick compared to what a lot of people are doing by captaining Salah or even, captaining other players. Because there will be a few people who go a different route. Maybe people do captain a Trent, but Haaland probably won't be the most captain player this week, and that could work in our favor. So I'm with you. I think Trent or Haaland would definitely be my 2 picks for sure. I'm always on board just sticking the man with the armband and letting him score again because it hasn't failed us yet, and I don't think it's going to fail us against Arsenal either. But I think, the way it stands right now and what we're looking at, that's probably our best case scenario for both of those options. But Tom, do you have any final thoughts before we get out of here? Because I think the team is set. Lewis, Alexander-Arnold, Robinson, Mbeumo, Mitoma, Jota, Saka, Eze, Haaland, and Isak for now. We'll be looking at transferring Isak out probably for Havertz if he's not going to play. If not, we will roll the transfer and keep him in there even against Fulham. I think if he doesn't play, it's only upside for Robinson. But do you have any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I think, again, it was a great week for us to have a chat about. Obviously, Game Week 4 was an absolute disaster. The more we can look forwards, the better. I think one reflection just from how bad it was is if you can quickly pull up our league and go to Dom's team, this is someone who looks like they picked their FPL team with a blindfold on and a dartboard of just random players. And I think he scored the highest out of all of our league this week.
73 points is what he had this week.
So this team scored 73 points. Who had De Ligt, Martinez, Cucurella, and Tosin. Curtis Jones is in there, Brennan Johnson, Ward-Prowse is in there. Do you know what I mean? So this is someone who has no ball knowledge, no anything, and it
hasn't changed his team all season.
Exactly, it's almost doubled. And if you look at the bench, it's even worse. I think there were players that came on for
Foden on the bench.
Out there, yeah. So there's a lot of questionable things, but a team like that can score 73. I think you just have to laugh. Okay, maybe this week was bad for everyone else. Let's just move forward and get going. So that's kind of where my head's at. I'm pretty happy. I'm having a laugh about it. But thanks again for a lovely podcast this week, Jay Rich.
Yeah, thank you to everybody who subscribed, and thank you to FPL Focal for getting us to 100. Tom, you are officially on the clock for your focal tattoo. But it was this week of any weeks, I've never felt more connected to the FPL community because misery loves company, and by God was I miserable this week. It was an absolute disaster, but we're on to Game Week 5. I'm so excited for it. And Tom, thank you for joining me from Turkey. We had a few interruptions, but we've never had a greater laugh than we had probably on this show today.
Yeah, it was good fun. So thank you, Jay Rich. Thank you, everyone. Big love.
Subscribe, like, comment, and we'll see you next week.